Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's special Last Post ceremony. My name is Jennifer Surtees, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Chief Petty Officer Tony Birchall. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland. We would also like to take a moment to consider and pay respect to the many professional and volunteer firefighters who are out in the thick of the bushfires, working in the most challenging and dangerous of conditions to keep people, places and communities safe. We thank you for your commitment and service, which reflects the essence of the Australian spirit, a spirit that we also showcase here in the stories at the Australian War Memorial. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting in 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story of just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who gave their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. Following the reading of the story of Trooper Gordon John Farmer, wreaths will be laid in commemoration. My apologies, the story for this evening is Private Thomas Francis Lynch.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Thomas Francis Lynch. Thomas Lynch was born around 1898 in Adelaide. The exact identity of his parents and the circumstances are unknown, but records indicate that from infancy he was brought up by his foster parents, Henry and Mary Lynch. Mary later wrote that she never told Thomas that he was adopted and loved him like a son. He grew up in central Adelaide and attended Christian Brothers College and later worked boilermaker's assistant at the Islington workshops. He was described as a favourite with all. Lynch enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 21st of July 1915. Began training with the newly formed 32nd Infantry Battalion at Mitcham Camp outside Adelaide. At the time of his enlistment, he was 17 years old, too young to join the armed forces. So he gave his age as 18 and provided a letter of consent from his mother in order to be allowed to serve. In November 1915, he sailed with the 32nd Battalion from Adelaide to Egypt. He arrived as Australian troops were making their evacuation from Gallipoli, so he did not serve with them, but instead began a period of training in preparation for the war on the Western Front in Europe. In June 1916, he sailed to France, and by the end of that month began a brief period of resting and training behind the lines at Morbec, near the French-Belgian border. Lynch served in A Company of the 32nd Battalion, which formed part of the 8th Brigade of the 5th Australian Division. He entered the trenches for the first time on the 16th of July, less than a month after his arrival in France. On the 19th of July 1916, he fought in the Battle of Fromelles, the first major action for which Australian forces were involved on the Western Front. In this battle, Australian troops attacked across no man's land in a series of waves. Lynch's A Company formed part of the 32nd Battalion's left flank. the troops encountered heavy German high explosive and shrapnel artillery, machine gun fire and barbed wire defences. The men of the 32nd Battalion were able to reach the first line of the German trenches, but found it difficult to consolidate that line because of the heavy fire and the muddy conditions. Over the night of the 19th and the 20th of July, Australian and German forces fought in a deadly series of attacks and counterattacks that would eventually cost over 5,500 Australian casualties. Lynch received a gunshot wound to his thigh and was evacuated to hospital. He did not rejoin his unit till the 15th of August, when it was carrying out repair work on the trenches and supply systems near Siet-Lac-Sec in the Somme River. On the 29th of November 1916, he was again wounded while fighting in northern France. This time the gunshot wound to his right arm and thigh. His injuries were so severe that he was evacuated to England, where he was taken to the 5th Southern General Hospital in Portsmouth. At 2:30 in the morning on the 18th of December 1916, after nearly 3 weeks in hospital, he died of his wounds. He was 18 years old. Today his remains lie buried in the Milton Cemetery in Portsmouth, where over 400 Australian casualties of the First and Second World War now lie. After receiving news of his death, Lynch's foster mother spent a great deal of time trying to find out about the circumstance of his fate and trying to obtain a picture of his grave in England. When she finally received a photo of his headstone, she wrote, "There is not one thing in this world this minute that I have longed for more than a photo of my dear boy. How I yearn to have that photo, no one knows. How will I ever thank those thoughtful people home in England enough for this kindness to us mothers in this far-off land?" Private Thomas Francis Lynch's name is listed on the Roll of Honour among the almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed here in Anzac Hall. But this is just one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Thomas Francis Lynch, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and for the hope of a better world.
Please stand and remove hats for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over, but in Australia they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. Tonight, our piper will play a lament for you, Flowers of the Forest, as you leave Anzac Hall. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.